Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back for my review of Black Clover Chapter 285. Okay, so in the last review, I mentioned how I was a little bit afraid by the ending of last week's chapter that Tabata was actually going to be skipping past whatever Noct's plan was to get past Lilith and Nama and make his way over to Morse in order to basically stop him from expediting the opening of the gates to the Devil World. But in this chapter, luckily enough, Tabata actually decided to actually go back in time and show us the events, and not only just show us the events of what happened during the fight between Noct and the two devils, but finally also give us the beginnings of Noct's flashback story. Okay, so the chapter opens up, and the first little text box we get is actually of the narrator saying that we're going back a few hours prior to Noelle and everyone showing up in the Spade Kingdom. Now, this has to be, really, it has to be a mistranslation. And even though all three versions of this chapter that I read have said that same thing, I think they're all going off the same mistranslation because of the fact that there's no way, when you look at the sequence of events that happened from the first gate opening up to Noelle and everyone showing up, there's no way even 1 hour had passed. In fact, if you go all the way back to everyone showing up to the Clover Kingdom group showing up in the Spade Kingdom to begin with, all the way up to where we're at in the last chapter, there's no way more than an hour had passed. And there's clear evidence that there's no way that much time had passed because, alright, so when we go back to the beginning of this entire invasion of the Spade Kingdom portion of the arc, when they get to the Spade Kingdom, they break up into three groups. We have three separate groups going off to fight off against each of the Dark Triad members. Now, when those three groups broke off, on their way to the Dark Triad, each one of them lost one member who stayed behind to fight off against the Dark Apostles they ran into on the way. So, those three people that actually broke off from each of the groups were Fugoyan, Nozel, and Dorothy. Now, go back to chapter 283, and we saw Fugoyan again for the first time since he broke off from his group, which was Noct and I believe Noct and Jack were who he was with. But that was the first time we've seen him since he broke off from that group to fight off against the Dark Apostles. Now, if you go back and look at that chapter, we see that Fugoyan is 100% healthy. He has no scratches on him, he has no battle damage. That means that he easily took care of the Dark Apostles that he was fighting against. So, if Fugoyan defeated his opponents easily, that means the fight had to be at max a few minutes. Because if it had actually been a very 1 hour long, drawn out battle, there will be some kind of effects on him, whether it be scratches, burn marks, some kind of battle damage, or at the very least, he would have some level of exhaustion. But when we see him show up in chapter 283, there's none of that. Okay, so now we know it only took Fugoyan a few minutes to defeat his Dark Apostles. Now, this brings up the question, why didn't he, after he defeated them, go and back up Noct and Jack when they were fighting off against Dante? And if we're going off the timeline that the chapter presents to us, from the time the first gate opened up to the time Noelle and everyone else showed up from the Heart Kingdom, there's a few missing hours, right? So if Fugoyan was done defeating his Dark Apostles after a few minutes, and there were hours between from that appearance to his first appearance in chapter 283, that would mean that for the few hours between then and then, Fugoyan was just sitting on his ass. He wasn't doing anything. Because he obviously didn't go and help Jack and Noct, because we didn't see him show up during the fight against Dante, and we didn't see him show up and fight off against the two devils that came out the first gate. So that means that if we're realistically speaking and we're looking at the kind of character that Fugoyan is, there's no way he would have sat on his ass and basically just said, hey, I'm going to let everyone else take care of it. He would have basically jumped right back into the action to go and help Noct and Jack if there was time for him to do it. But because of the fact that there wasn't time, because the devils were coming out of the first gate and attacking the civilians, he immediately jumped into action to protecting the civilians instead of backing up Noct and Jack. I feel like I'm spending too much time ranting about this first text box in the beginning of the chapter, so I'm just going to end it here by saying that, realistically speaking, Noct, even though we like the character, there's no way that the fight between him fighting off against Lilith and Nama by himself would have lasted hours. Alright, so as we actually get into the chapter, I actually really like the way Tabata has presented Lilith and Nama to us, the way their characters are interacting with each other and their surroundings. And you could tell from this chapter that the two of them are just kind of here to have fun. They don't see any of this as actually being a serious moment. They kind of just see the world, the human world, as a playground for them. You could tell from their dialogue in the chapter that they are really just here enjoying the moment. They're not here to conquer the world. They're not here to basically slaughter all humans for some kind of vendetta. They are here because they think that killing humans and basically destroying the world would just be a fun thing to do. A way to kill the time. And you can see in the chapter that even when it comes to Dante, they don't even regard Dante as an ally or anything like that. We get more into their mindset of how they see him. And you can see in this chapter that the two of them actually contemplated killing him off right there, just because they thought he was a little bit annoying. But because of the fact that he's Lucifero's plaything, as they mentioned, or his toy, they leave him alone. But you could tell from their interactions with Nacht, they're a little bit intrigued by Nacht, or at the very least they're willing to play with him and actually give him the time of day. Because throughout the entire chapter, when he's actually going up against them, the two of them are enjoying their time fighting off against him, but at the same time, they don't, again, seem to be taking him seriously. Because, I mean, throughout the entire time that they're fighting against Nacht, no matter what he does, it doesn't seem to really that much affect them. In fact, I mean, it does affect them as far as, like, there's a moment where Nacht actually halts their movements and transports them to a different place. There's a moment where he actually uses his monozoned, I believe it was called hunting ground or something like that, dark hunting ground, something like that, and it completely blinds them, makes everything pitch black so they can't see anything besides each other. And even in those moments, they're like, oh, wow, this is kind of fun. And they're just having a competition to see who can just wildly attack at random in the area around them and actually manage to land an attack on Nacht first. I mean, seriously, watching these two fight off against Nacht in this chapter felt like watching two older kids play a game against a much younger kid. Now, we don't actually get to see many actual spells from the Lilith and Nama in this chapter. We just see them using their ice and fire magic just wildly without actually casting any spells or anything like that. So I'm actually going to be interested in seeing exactly when they actually do get serious. What kind of spells and abilities do they have outside of just being able to shoot icicles and flames at their opponents? Now, speaking of spells, we actually get to see a lot of Nox in this chapter. In fact, we also get to see a brand new Devil Union in this chapter with Nox with his Bird Devil. And I believe that was the last one that we hadn't seen yet. So now we've seen all Nox Devil Union modes, unless he has one where he combines all four of his devils together into one Devil Union uniform. But we see the new one, and man, this actually might be my... I'm having a hard time deciding if I like the one with Pumede more, or if I like this one, because this one actually kind of has like a witch, like a, not witch, like a medieval doctor, like, you know those medieval doctors that you see that have those like long beak mask? It almost had that exact look, except for the fact that the beak actually kind of cuts off at the top, so the mask doesn't complete the entire face. But still, the design is cool as hell, and actually, again, just like the Model's design, it looks like something straight out of Bloodborne. Now, the ability that Nacht has with it is actually kind of interesting, although I'm not exactly sure how that combines with shadow magic in its entirety. I mean, I guess I can kind of understand it, but at the same time, it doesn't really combine that well. Basically, the ability for the Bird Devil is Screech, which basically emits a like sonic sound that freezes his opponents in place. And I can understand the way that Tabata intended for it to work, where the ability, you know, it freezes his opponents, and then Nacht uses his shadow magic to transport them to a different location. But that's not really combining his shadow magic with that ability. That's basically just using the ability and then comboing it with a shadow magic ability that he already had, not using that ability to basically enhance shadow magic or use it in a different way. And we only get to see that Devil Union mode for that one scene in the chapter, so I'm hoping if Nacht ends up surviving this arc, which based off the last chapter is not looking good for him, but if he does end up surviving the arc, I hope in future chapters we actually get to see him use that mode again and can see more of its abilities. Now, after he transports himself and the two devils to a different location, he immediately activates his monozone to blind them with his hunting ground, and then transforms into his Devil Union mode Phyllis, which, by the way, I did mention the name of the Devil Union mode for the Bird Devil, or I didn't also mention the Bird Devil's name, because the fan translations usually get them wrong, so I'm going to wait till the official translation comes out to actually get the official name for them. But, he transports the three of them to that place. He goes into his Fearless mode, and then immediately just kind of goes on the defensive. He has no opportunity to attack, because as soon as Lilith and Nama start attacking, it's non-stop, constant attack after constant attack, and it's taking everything he has basically just to dodge them. Actually, no, wait, I actually just went back and checked, and I was wrong. Before going into Fearless mode, he actually goes into Equus mode in order to basically go into defensive from their attacks, and then once they actually find him in the dark area, basically that's when he goes into Fearless in order to basically avoid their attacks from getting too close to him. But yeah, pretty much throughout the entire chapter, he's on the defensive. And then we trigger a flashback. And this is actually really cool because we finally get to see Nacht's backstory. We actually get to see more interaction between, or like the beginning interactions between him and Yami and his brother. And before I even get into the actual flashback events, I just want to say that just based off the things that happened in the chapter for the flashback, and the fact that it took place in the second half of the chapter, I'm predicting that we're going to be getting like an Oda level flashback story. Not as long as Oda's flashbacks go, because Oda's flashbacks go for chapters on chapters. I'm thinking that we're probably going to get one more chapter, maybe two at the most, of this flashback. But when it comes to the emotional level that Oda's flashbacks hit on, I can tell this chapter is going to hit on that same type of emotional level. The same, like, think back to the flashback we got when we found out Lee's backstory with Asa's mom. It's going to hit just as hard, if not harder, than that flashback did, so prepare yourself for this. But anyway, during the flashback, we actually go back a few years and we get to see Nacht, as we end up finding out in the chapter, as he was a member of the Grey Deer, and we see that he was actually a very good person. He was actually someone who was actually very active in helping out people, and in contrast to that, his brother was actually someone who was very selfish and actually didn't really want to help out people. He only used his magic for his own needs, and he had a very punk rock, kind of like very rebellious look to him. Like, his design actually looks very rebellious and cool. He definitely looks like someone that Magna would have looked up to heavily. Now, as the flashback's going on, we had the two brothers talking, and we see that Nacht is trying to introduce his brother, or try to basically bring his brother into the Magic Knights, because he thinks that with his magic, the two of them could save a lot more people than he's doing alone. But his brother says, hey, listen, where's the fun in that? Because we already know from the introduction of the flashback that his brother's a very selfish person who only uses his magic for his own enjoyment. But while the two of them are arguing about this, we have Yami show up, who actually calls out the name Morgan, and talks to him and says that, hey, we have a mission. So he's talking to, because of the fact that he's the only one of the two brothers who's actually a Magic Knight, he's talking to the person that we've been calling Nacht this entire time. Or at least we seemingly think that. But he calls to him and says, hey, Morgan, we have a mission. And then he gets in an argument with the other brother, and we end up finding out that this brother's name is Nacht. And yeah, this is a huge reveal, because now we have the question, which brother are we following in the present day? Is this Morgan pretending to be Nacht, or is this Nacht pretending or taking up the appearance of Morgan? Because we don't know. We don't know which character this actually is. This Nacht that we've been following the entire time. We don't know which brother it is, and there's equal evidence from his introduction to the current chapter to support either theory. So until this flashback ends, we can't say with definitive evidence that it's one or the other. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who, when they actually review this chapter, are going to say that this has to be one or this has to be the other, because this evidence points to this and this evidence points to that. But remember, there's equal evidence to both theories. And I will I'll probably make a video later on in the week talking about, before the next chapter comes out, talking about the two possible theories for which one it could be. But remember, until we get the official word from Tabata on the official release of the chapter, once this flashback ends, we won't know which brother it is. So don't take any theories as being absolute truth. Just take them as a possibility until we get the official chapter coming out. But anyway, guys, that's all that happened in this week's chapter. Now, actually, before I end the video, I just decided I am going to give my 2 cents real quick on which one I actually think it is, which theory I think is right. As of right now, based off of how I'm feeling after reading this week's chapter, I'm leaning more towards the idea that this is Morgan pretending to be Nacht, not the other way around. Now, again, like I said, this is not concrete evidence. This is not concrete. This is basically just my theory. Tabata's going to have the final word on this when he reveals it in the official chapter. So until then, don't take anything as concrete evidence. But let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. Do you think this is actually Nacht pretending to be Morgan, or do you think this is Morgan pretending to be Nacht? I really want to hear what you guys' opinions are and what your theories are. But that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.